Throughout centuries, we have crossed borders, becoming silent and invisible in order to do so. We maintain this silence and invisibility in the new environment in order to stay and to stay safe. No matter how invisible we become, we are somehow a community, one that spans time. We traverse these foreign lands as shadows of ourselves, hidden between the fissures of their towering architecture. We walk past their monuments. They are not for us, because they are the opposite of invisible. But somehow they see us, and they stare. Maybe they see us only when they want to get rid of us. We react, we act, we enact, because we don't like this kind of visibility. We have stories. They're invisible too. Do the monuments stare at us because they know that our stories are unbreakable, unlike the monuments that they are? Storytelling is a form of care, a form of transmission, a form of memorialization. Stories can be a cartography, a currency, a negotiation. Storytelling is an act of resistance. Crossing a border is also an act of resistance. In similar ways, they are both performative, both narrative, both urgent, both embodied, and both have uncanny relationships with the idea of memory. Sometimes we find solidarities and assistance and compassion during these crossings. Sometimes we give assistance, compassion, and solidarity to those crossing because we understand what it means and what is at stake. Since the mid-1800s, the French military recruited men from their multiple colonies in order to maintain colonial rule and to expand colonial territories. The colonial soldiers were called tirailleurs, riflemen. Tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands in total, were shipped from North and West Africa, as well as from Southeast Asia, to Europe during World War I and World War II to support the French military and to ensure French national safety. Years later, tirailleurs were sent from North and West Africa to Southeast Asia, to what was known as Indochina at the time by the French, to squash the rebellion that began against the French in 1946. After a 10-year struggle, the French were defeated in 1954. This is what Frantz Fanon calls the beginning of the end of the French Empire. Little do most people know that hundreds of Vietnamese women and their children migrated to West Africa with Senegalese husbands, who had been stationed in Indochina as colonial soldiers. Many other soldiers left their wives and partners behind and took only their children, while still others took mixed or Vietnamese children not their own and raised them in Senegal without knowledge of or connection to their origins. The Spectre of Ancestors Becoming is a multi-channel film made in collaboration with the Senegalese Vietnamese community in Dakar that come from this specific exodus. The film showcases a large number of members from the community, but it focuses on three main fictional stories written by three individuals from the community that challenge the voids and silences that have happened in their own personal lives. The community is now in their fourth or fifth generation and are grappling with the loss of the first generation mothers who were a tremendous source of embodied memory and knowledge. As of today, there are only two mothers from that first generation who migrated to Senegal who are still alive. The personal is political. The personal is historical. Personal narratives reveal, unpack, and humanize the political complexities that have happened historically in ways that history books will never be able to do. You embody a story as you listen to it. The three writers are Anne-Marie Niane, Makadou Njai, and Mary Bay Diouf. Anne-Marie Niane was born in Saigon and remembers the silence between her Senegalese father, a soldier in the French army, and her Vietnamese mother before they had to leave Vietnam. Her mother had no choice and no voice. Anne-Marie reimagines a more vocal interaction regarding the decision to leave Vietnam. It is a dialogue that explores the multiple points necessary to understand such a complex and dangerous moment for such a family in this specific moment in history. Nguyen, a lawyer who is now in his 60s, grew up not knowing that he was Métis. Métis is a French term for being of mixed heritage. It wasn't until he stumbled upon some old letters and photographs accidentally did he realize that he was half Vietnamese and that his mother was left in Vietnam. He was never able to confront his overbearing father about this while his father was alive. Makadu writes an imagined conversation that he has with his father where he reveals his knowledge of his origins and declares that he has given his daughter his biological mother's namesake, Nguyen. Mary Bay Diouf told me the love story her grandmother and her grandfather had in Vietnam. Her grandmother hid this French soldier from Africa in her house to protect him from being killed, even standing in front of rifles of Vietnamese soldiers who threatened to kill her if she didn't reveal his whereabouts. She stood unmoved. Mary Bay remembers the daily ritual of combing her grandmother's hair after lunch in Dakar. Her grandmother would speak only rarely about her past. Indochina was a lost memory. As a poet, Mary Bay reimagines a conversation based on her experience with her grandmother that traverses time and space. The project is installed as a 4-channel installation in an open square configuration. The writer performs the text she has written on one screen.
Tu ne te souviens pas de moi. Je veux me souvenir.
On the opposite screen, members of the Senegalese Vietnamese community enact the dialogue, moving in hallucinatory slow motion, all the while attempting to synchronize their lips to the spoken words of the writer. This channel is the visualization, so to speak, and possibly one of many and multiple embodiments of the voice.
Il n'y a pas d'Indochine. Tu te souviens du passé? Je me souviens de mes parents.
Performance is embedded in the moving image as well as in the viewing of the installation itself. The viewers also perform as they take in the narratives. They complete the narrative with their movement. It is them who, by their decision to move and turn between the 4 different directions, create a unique edit of the work so that one can never view the same film twice. The movement of one individual inside the space affects the movement of others inside the space. They watch each other watching. We perform ourselves daily, don't we? This notion of performing oneself is multiplied times over for the displaced subject, for refugees, for asylum seekers, for undocumented migrants, and so on and so forth. It is activated in their relationships with loved ones left behind. It is activated as they navigate harsh new foreign territories, as they avoid deportation and imprisonment. The stakes are high as people have to flip between being invisible to being hypervisible all the time. In December of 2018, 5 or so volunteers who didn't know each other previously founded a squad. After having realized that there was a tremendous amount of people, mostly refugees and asylum seekers, living without shelter on the streets of Marseille. The group called themselves Collectif 59 Saint-Just, after the address of the building that they took over, which was owned by the Diocese of Marseille. This all happened at a time where the local government was led by right-wing conservatives, very harsh in their stance against immigration. The squat sheltered up to 300 people at any given time, but was under constant threat of eviction. I was invited on a research trip to Marseille in November of 2019. I had heard about Squat Saint-Just in my research. While there, we reached out and began to talk with the volunteers and the tenants of the squat. I gave a presentation of my work for Manifesta and showed some previous films. A member of the collective brought some tenants to the presentation, and we began to talk, to engage in a dialogue. And we began discussing a possible collaboration. And we eventually decided that we would use my invitation by Manifesta 13 and the biennial's pull with the local government to present an artwork that situates the squat as a crucial site of production and exhibition. We were going to create an ambitious film about Marseille, but shot entirely in and around the squat. And the film would be exhibited in the squat's ground floor assembly hall. And the tenants who wanted to participate would write the film, help manage the production of the film, and make up the film crew. And they would, of course, be noted as artists, collaborators in the project, and listed on the manifesto roster. And we would exhibit the film like any cinematic work, any video work in a space. But we would withhold the dialogue track and have that missing dialogue be filled in live, be performed live by the actors, writers, participants themselves. Thereby, again, situating the collaborators as a crucial and critical part of the film that could not be missing. The project was envisioned as a strategy to stand in solidarity with Collective 59 Saint-Just and the tenants of Squat Saint-Just, to utilize the arts infrastructure of Manifesto 13 to situate Squat Saint-Just as a significant exhibition space during the biennial. The attempt was to, at the very least, use the Biennale platform to extend or sustain the life of the squat for the 6 or so months that the biennial was running. The performance of the film came out of an urgency to make the invisible visible, to give a physical presence to the voices that we so often talk about but don't really hear nor see. The beginning of 2020 and the pandemic gave us a series of challenging twists and turns. While all of the other European biennials were closing or being canceled or postponed, Manifesta decides that it's going to delay a bit but will still open in the fall of 2020. All the while, Squat Saint-Just was in the middle of a court battle. Tenants were making speeches at demonstrations, holding rallies, court cases, eviction notices, and so on and so forth. In the middle of pre-production, the squat was suspiciously set on fire on June 8th, 2020. And this is about a year and a half after its founding, so it's been running for a year and a half with much success, helping a lot of people. The whole project was forced to change drastically, of course, but we were all quite committed to seeing the project through. With support from Via Art Fund, we continued pushing forward. The idea, again, was to allocate art world resources to the squat and to the tenants. And because traveling was proving more and more difficult at that time, we ended up doing everything remotely. Lots of meetings were held online through Skype, Zoom, WhatsApp. Smartphone footage was used to tell stories and to send stories back and forth. Some of this footage was used in the film, and we kept the entire film in this format to privilege the portrait. Our exhibition venue was moved to the Music Conservatory of Marseille, a beautiful old classical building that once housed the art school. So on October 9th, 2020, the writers, actors performed the film, which is comprised of a series of scenes, each scene a dialogue that explores various moments in the lives of the writers that relate to ideas of assistance, solidarity, the journey, memory, the future, hope, and storytelling. Crimes of Solidarity is an incomplete film, a forever fractured narrative that deliberately withholds the sound of the voices that attempt to retell its stories. But it is not a silent film. On the contrary, it is a film that desires to be heard. It is a film that opts for a live voice, the actual live utterances by the writers of those words, the teller of those stories, at once embodied and disembodied, occupying multiple spaces, who speak beyond borders into the past, present, and future simultaneously.